Hello, everyone, and welcome to Discover Joyous Love. I'm your host, Anita DeFrancesco, and this program comes to you on Monday. It is my webcam here. You can find this available on my YouTube channel, but initially it'll be the raw footage on the Facebook page, but you can eventually go over to the YouTube channel is where it's saved, Anita DeFrancesco, and today's topic, episode 10, is the idea of intimacy. And this is a very special topic because everything we do, everywhere we go, every encounter we make is an intimate one. Or at least we don't know it is, but it is. Because everything requires some form of intimacy in order to move to the next step in life, in order to move into a healthy relationship. Now, I know that most of us think of intimacy as sexual, sensual, being in bed and making love and having the tools to be intimate in bed. But to have those tools, you have to begin in the family unit. You have to start somewhere. Now, as an infant, you're born and the mother holds you and you look into her eyes. And this is the first connection of bonding. And bonding is the first connection to developing intimacy. So intimacy, we learn from our role models, and we also learn how to connect with other people by being in groups, by being in, once you start to go to school, if you're connected with other children, or you're not isolated, or you don't have trust issues. A lot of children these days get isolated because we're spending a lot of time on texting, and that can, that can cause unnecessary isolation where you're not wanting to approach or be confronted by others or not even have a conversation anymore. People sometimes are forgetting how to speak because they're so involved in texting, and their thoughts become their feelings, which there is some form of feeling in texting, but it is important to connect with people in a group. And let me give you some ideas about intimacy. First of all, intimacy is about getting fulfilled. How do you get fulfilled? You don't get fulfilled by just getting hugged and loved and having sex or being an older person. Let's start when you're young. You're a teenager. And how do you get fulfilled intimately if you don't come from a real connected family? Maybe your parents are divorced and there's a lot of separation going on. And this separation can lead you to be maybe a loner or to do more things alone because you haven't had any good role models. Now, someone once said that it has been said that all fear arises from a sense of separation. So when we are separated from, say, the family unit, this is where the isolation can begin. But then again, it depends on what you're exposed to, what the rest of your family is like. If you were, for example, I was on a swim team for many, many years. And I became so connected, of course, to the team people, but I became very connected to the sport itself. And I had an intimacy and a bond with me and the water, me and the swimming, me and the pool. And this went on for about 20 years that I was on some swim teams, and then I would just practice my own athletics of swimming, and I would do 3 times a week, 50 laps. And it was something that I developed a relationship with. So having a relationship with something in your life, a hobby, cooking, even a sport, sports, of course, or yoga, you're working with a team, or if you just have, say you're cooking a lot and you're alone, but you're having that relationship with cooking. And what happens is you're learning to open the heart, and you're developing what we call in the moment, presence, what Eckhart Tolle talks about. Now, part of intimacy is getting fulfilled. That affection, that emotion, that part of us that needs to feel alive with others in the world. So what I find is, like, for example, yesterday I was in a jacuzzi in a pool, and it seemed desolate and alone, and there was no one around. But then there was this one lady there. She didn't look approachable, but I started to talk to her. And she was the most beautiful soul. She opened up. I saw this awakening, this opening, like she was delighted that I started to speak with her, and I felt like I fulfilled my intimate moment there. It was a moment that I broke isolation and confronted someone. a lot of time, being intimate requires, it's not, again, it's not a sex thing. It's not a bed thing. It requires being open-minded. It requires courage. It takes courage. Striking up that conversation with someone instead of walking around saying you're lonely, you have no one. And because you're not allowing yourself to open up to your higher power, to your fullness, your full potential. What is your full potential? Exercising your right to talk to people. Now, sometimes when we have a lot of unsolved frozen trauma in the body, this makes intimacy a little bit more challenging, a little bit tougher. So one of the things we want to do is encounter and open up the can of worms, undo the layers. The work needs to be done. And of course, whatever you choose to do, whatever path you take that you see that would help you to undo the layers of trauma, that's if you know you have trauma. You want to sit down and write down your experiences, reflect on your life, see where you're going and what stage in life are you, and are you happy? So the key is happiness in the end. But intimacy can be fulfilled with one's own heart by self-loving yourself. You don't want to keep all the love for yourself. You want to share it, but in order to share it, it has to be clean and clear. It has to be healthy love, that you want to share love with people, not out of neediness or out of codependency or fixation, but you want to share the love with them because that brings in what we call a sacred space of intimacy. And it doesn't, again, have to be romantic or a relationship of that sort. It can just be two friends or a child and an adult. How about a pet? Pets give us a lot of intimacy. People have pets, cats, dogs, even a bird, or I see people having reptiles and things of that sort nowadays in their home. Fish. You can have an intimate relationship with your fish in the tank at home, and you can talk to them like your plants. How about your plants? Don't you think people have an intimate relationship with plants? They speak to the plants, and the plants grow beautifully. So there is that form of intimacy, but it's done with your relationship to space and your heart. So your heart has to be there. As Willem Reich says, there's what he calls the Schizoid Personality type. It's not schizophrenic, but it's schizoid. And a schizoid is a person who is distant, who is detached from the self, who is split, who is isolated. And in a group, they look like they're just a frozen stick. And when they look at you in their eyes, or you look into their eyes, it is empty. So the Schizoid Personality type, which some people have elements of that and some people have a full-blown of that, that needs a lot of attention psychologically, emotionally, somatically, because they were frozen. They split from the family. Maybe the dad did something to the mother that was abusive when they were very young. So you have to see what experiences the person had as a child. You can create intimacy by reconciling restoring your connections with people, your enemies. Think about your enemies out there and the people you were estranged from for a very long time, maybe even family members. You can uplift intimacy. You can strike it back into your life, bring that spark back with the people that are your enemies, an old friend or even old lovers. I'm not saying to go have a relationship again with people like that, but what I am saying is that reconciling your differences is a way, and letting go of grudges. Like you may be holding a grudge toward a particular, not necessarily a person, but a particular company out there, or maybe you buy a certain product, and because the product doesn't meet up to your needs anymore, you hold a grudge, but you still want that product. Like, for example, some designer clothing or something, because maybe it took a different political turn than what your beliefs are. But it's really not about that. Intimacy is about letting go of grudges in life, of anything. Having patience with yourself is also intimacy, because you come into that silent place. So opening up to the silence, allowing yourself to step into silence and take that time to hear the silence, Oh, take a deep breath in for a moment and hear your breath. Listening to Discover Joyous Love. I'm Anita DeFrancesco, and it is Mondays with Anita, episode 10 here. The idea of intimacy is the topic. This is a very old cup I got in Texas a long time ago when my brother moved there, I think. Anyhow, I was just in Austin, but it's not from there. I would have got an Austin cup. Cultivating this relationship to your feelings. And the team is you, yourself, and I. Now, you can extend that team into sports, into school. When you get to school, you join activities. You join activities so that you can connect with people, that you can exercise those feelings that make you feel accepted, that make you feel emoted. You can emote and exercise your feelings of sadness, love, dislike, jealousy, whatever it is. The feelings need to move. They need to be exercised. And once you start to get with people or situations, then you will be able to understand your heart. One person said, and I have a quote here, I'll put it up, but I don't have an author on this. Here it is. There's nothing more intimate in life than simply being understood and understanding someone else. And how many times do you hear people say, nobody understands me, nobody understands me? And do you understand others? Do you take that time, or do you criticize? Do you point the finger? Do you only hear them partially? Because we have to focus when people are talking. It is best to hear with your whole body, your whole essence. And I find that people, the most intelligent people in the world, are not focused into hearing what another person has to say about whatever their drama is for that week or that day. And again, remember, the little things matter. And everything has a concern, whether it's, a little trivial thing. We want someone to hear that and understand us. So understanding another and being understood is a good place to start for you this week. Let me get back to a little bit more notes here for you. Closeness between people, but it's closeness to your heart, yourself. That's what the idea of intimacy is. So what we want to do is expand upon our intimacy. Vulnerability. So intimacy increases when you open up to showing someone your soul, showing someone who you are, who the authentic you is through your feelings. In other words, being honest, being communicative. Being honest is where this intimacy begins. And if you learn intimacy from a young age or throughout all of the different things that you do in your life, you will have a successful marriage, successful intimacy with a partner one day or a companion that will go long term for you. And ultimately, that is really what people want. They want to be in love. They want to have love. But they dance around it in so many ways because they can't face themselves, and people don't understand them. They don't understand anyone else. And they're not really connecting. They're running from the feeling. So, what helps you move toward intimacy? Going beyond the sexual and the sensual, beyond the traditional concept of intimacy, because that's as what we know it to be. But again, to get there, it takes the village, the whole village, to get you to be intimately in love with a significant other. Most agree that sexual, sensual contact enhances intimacy. Most would admit that sex without intimacy is common, the sexual revolution. Now, I grew up in the sexual revolution, and we were allowed to have sex without being married. So that constituted having sex without feeling, because it was understood that you meet someone, you have feeling for them, you love them, you marry them or have sex with them or make love to them. It was making love. Sex has become objective, has become a materialistic thing in the world. So people can have sex without feeling, and they're doing it all the time because they're so... And that whole sexual revolution caused a lot of splits and caused a lot of people's emotions to be dormant and unexercised. There's a lot of issues that came out of that. But we needed to have the sexual revolution, and Dr. Wilhelm Reich, R-E-I-C-H, he coined the term sexual revolution. and he was a medical doctor, wrote a book about the function of the orgasm and how the breathing relates to the splitness of the body and the orgasm. But that's a whole nother topic. But what I wanted to say about the sexual revolution is that, and sex, that really, sex without intimacy is very common, and it continues to go. Now, some people have sex and, it might be like what you call a sexual relationship, or you have some feeling for that person, because you have to have some kind of feeling, I guess, or you at least drum it up. You create it so that you can continue to have the sex. Or the sex itself exercises the emotion of love and brings out some love. But is it true love? Not necessarily, not half the time. But it's okay to exercise the love and have that. But again, sex is separate from the human emotion. And for me, I'm the kind of person that I believe that I'm so connected and transformed to my higher power that I really, and being a Tantra teacher, my work is Tantra wisdom, that I could only be the love to really feel the love. So for me, sex is love. For a lot of people, for me, sex is love, but for a lot of people, love is sex. We'll get on these topics. We'll get more. Sex is a false sense of intimacy. It's false. Sex, intimacy are not necessarily synonymous, okay? Sex is just a physical sport. You're sporting when you do sex, with people. You go to swingers clubs, people do that all the time, or they have threesomes, or they do polyamory, or they have a significant other and they're very in love, and then they go out and have like a mistress or something. They need more food, maybe they have more needs, but basically it's a sport. They're going out having a sport. So sex and intimacy are not necessarily synonymous. You've heard like, oh, I love you, my wife. You're the one, I love you. But then they're out there, for lack of a better word, betrayal, cheating, whatever. No, desire. Someone is out, the man or woman. And that's okay if it's all understood, but that's the sporting of it. Not to say that you couldn't love two people at once. People can. It's very common. But in doing so, the possibility of understanding and experiencing profound variations and levels of intimacy beyond sex, being intimate with your hobbies and pets. We've already spoken about that. Foods, intimacy with food. Now, don't go overboard, because if you have a real intimate connection to sugar, that could turn into an addiction. Remember, intimacy and addiction are different. Just because you have this profound, deep, enlightening connection to sugar, which I do. I love sugar, but I eat my good foods too. I'm not going to deny myself sugar. I do not get addicted to it, nor do I let it make my body get out of shape, but it certainly has a place in my heart. So that, to me, is a very intimate thing. When I'm about to have a glass of wine, say, and some candy, some sugared candy, or that helps the emotions, or my emotions, or anyone's emotions, to open up to the sadness, the happiness. These are the emotions that shape and develop this intimate part of the human character. So experiencing connection is a way of being able to see life more fully. Now, the sparks of divine oneness. Once you come into the whole self and you start to connect to your whole being, you have these sparks of divine oneness. You're attaining a deeper, higher power, a more transformational, higher place. And intimacy, of course, begins at birth. Like we said, you're bonding with the mother, but the more you develop into what we call this oneness and this highness, you will have this relationship with your feeling. And what that breeds is a sense of independence, confidence, that you don't have to really have another person to exercise intimacy. You need to understand yourself, and then you'll be able to understand people just in general, in everyday conversation, that will itself fulfill the intimacy. You have to try it. We're so cold texting these days. We're not even looking or talking to people, conversing anymore. How do you expect intimacy to stay alive? The recognition of the self via seeing into the connection with another is an essential aspect of the expression. So the expression, mutual recognition of the presence of the divine essence and goodness in the self and another constitutes spiritual intimacy. Again, so the divine in me honors the divine in you, and I see the divine in you and the sacred in you, and you see that in me. But it's not about seeing it. First of all, you have to do the work to be able to see it. You have to be in your higher power. And then you have to honor that in each other. You have to create that space where the divine lives within your relationship. It begins with your heart, with yourself. And these are Tantra exercises, acknowledging and appreciating. So we can get more into that. Divine essence is recognized from an altered, non-ordinary state of consciousness. So we have to get out of the head, out of the ego, and become into what we call a non-ordinary state of consciousness. And then divinity can be received. It's like receiving Holy Communion in a Catholic church that and even when nowadays you have to take, in order to be in the presence of the High Spirit, when you go up to the priest to receive your communion, you should be removing your mask, since we're wearing masks now. And because you have to have this non-altered state in general, in Hinduism, where I practice yoga, this non-altered state for divinity to enter the spirit. And this is karma. This is your cleansing your spirit. And there's many ways to do it. Smudging, emotional work, breathing. So this non-ordinary state of consciousness is when the divinity can be received. I just gave you an example with Catholic Church and how that is with the communion. And for just that one moment when you get the communion and you remove your mask, you don't remove it because you put the communion in your hands. But you remove the mask down because you're in the presence of the High Spirit, the Lord. A quiet mind, oneness with life in general, quieting the mind, silence. Can you hear your silence? Well, I love listening to my silence. It is so important for me. And I feel that I don't have a lot of head noise because I've done the work, so the head chatter is gone. But there's chatter outside, there's a lot of noise with people, and of course, life in general. But if you cultivate this quietness within, if you continually cultivate quietness, what happens is that your spirit becomes very strong. Your spirit is strong, and we are working toward refining for the next life. I know some of you don't believe that, but that's another topic. Oh my goodness. Okay, folks. Let's see here. I'm losing control. How do we do this? Let's start with eye gazing. Take a partner, look in the eyes. Anybody. So what I want you to do, in Tantra, wisdom, which is my work, we teach people how to eye gaze. It could be couples, it could be friends, it could be an adult, a child, but not more than likely it's couples because they want to enhance intimacy and have a more sparking, passionate, love-making relationship. But in the world, when you go out to the grocery store, or when you're in the market, or when you're in whatever you're doing at the gym and you're encountering someone at a desk where you have to check in, the practice that I'm recommending or suggesting is to look in someone's eyes to get started. And the more eyes you look in, you continually dissolve the armor. The armor begins in the eyes. So there's armor. It's like a shield that we all have. And because of the things that we see in life that we don't want to see, or the news that we watch that we take offense to. So when you continually look in other people's eyes, you are continually connecting and exercising intimacy. It's not intimate in the sense that you think, oh my goodness, I'm having a feeling, a sexual feeling. That's not what I mean. You're opening up your heart is where intimacy begins. So start by looking in eyes. Sometimes a touch. Now, if you're with a partner, having more touch in the relationship. But if you're not with a partner, and you are in the world, sometimes just shaking someone's hand or touching someone on the arm. So just some very, with boundaries touch, like touching someone's hand or maybe a light hug. These kinds of things can open up the heart and teach you that there is such a thing as the idea of intimacy. Any spiritual practice is empowering. Any spiritual practice. Oneness, divinity, presence, with a regular practice, we can tap into what we call unlimited energy. So when you have this oneness, divinity, and the presence, with a regular practice of whatever it is, it's not always going to be yoga or breathing. There's so much out there. Playing tennis, like really getting it. Bowling. Oh, bowling is so connected, so intimate with your heart and the focusing, just throwing that ball. You're throwing the ball. My sister does this. She bowls, and my mom did on tournaments. And that is such an intimate connection with your heart and yourself. And then you have your team. But it's a solo sport. And it's not like, even golf is. It's not like football. You're touching and rolling in and out of each other. Or even like hockey or basketball. There's a lot of physicality in those sports. But, so you're tapping into your unlimited energy. And if you allow that unlimited energy to come alive, you no longer need energy, attention, approval, control. Instead, we begin to feed by the intimate love. So really what it boils down, my topic is my theme here is Discover Joyous Love. Topic is, of course, the idea of intimacy today, episode 10. But when you, all you need is love, intimate love, to be fed by that, is once you start dissolving the material, the egos, the, undoing. A little bit more for you folks. Intimacy is a closeness. Again, we already got that. But the true intimacy is with yourself. Trust, isolation, revealing who you are, allowing yourself to be seen, performing in a play, singing opera, acting in a theater play, singing on stage, pop singing, playing in a band, guitarist, jazz musician. This is beautiful intimacy with music and dancing, being a dancer. These are ways to intimate your soul into life. Finding the creative arts, even being a fine artist, drawing is another way of intimacy. I love it. I love being intimate. And all of these things all connect together on a string, and they loop around. And then when you meet the ultimate twin flame in life, you really come full circle. Right? So there's 5 levels of intimacy, which I'm not even going to talk about it, but communication, other people's opinions and beliefs. How supportive are you to other people's opinions and beliefs? Your friend tells you just met the love of your life, or you got the greatest job and your friend doesn't support you. And the friend puts it down and talks negative about it. Though that is not intimate. That is a wall. That is jealousy, too. And that is selfishness and hate. But people have to support your... if they do support your opinions and beliefs and you do theirs, this is where we go back to being understood and understanding another. Personal opinions and beliefs matter. And if they are positively generated from the other individual, then this is where you can start to open up your intimacy. But some people shut down their intimacy. It's shutting down your feelings. Needs, emotions, and desires. Having the vulnerable, deep emotional conversation is what I'm going to leave you on. So if you want to begin intimacy this week, have a deep, vulnerable conversation. Deep, vulnerable conversation with anyone. A friend. A person you're involved with. When you have this deep, vulnerable conversation, and you do it, say, once every other week or once a month with someone, it's like going to a therapist and you're talking, but it's a little bit different because the therapist kind of has to wear this wall and they have to have a shield and they have to just be a listener. But if you're having a deep, vulnerable conversation with someone, you can certainly get a response. And then you get this give and take, this push and pull, this to and fro. And that's the idea of intimacy. Thank you for listening to Discover Joyous Love. I've been your host, Anita DeFrancesco, episode 10, and the topic was the idea of intimacy.